Foreign ministers and statesmen from over 35 countries are meeting in London to outline Libya's political future. Let's now get some more from our correspondent, Laura Emmett. She is following the meeting for us. Laura, we've been showing these publicity shots of these statesmen and these foreign ministers from these 35 countries. They all seem quite eager and happy and content to get involved in what's going on with Libya here. Can you tell us this meeting that's going on today, what exactly is expected to be the end result of it? Do you know?
Well, there are a lot of countries represented here in London today, between 35 and 37 actually by my count, including the UK, plus representatives from NATO, the European Union, the United Nations, and of course, importantly, the Arab League. Also important to note that Russia and China, neither of those countries are present. So that sort of takes out two dissenting voices potentially from around the table, because of course they abstained, both of them, when the UN voted, when the Security Council voted on the resolution which took them to Libya in the first place. And there's been a lot of talk so far about speaking with one voice, particularly from Hillary Clinton at the very beginning of the meeting. So it's very unclear what these countries and these organisations are actually going to be able to agree on. They're obviously coming to the table with the will to agree, but what we might ultimately result in is something like agreeing to agree rather than any sort of concrete decision. They outlined three goals for this meeting. The first was to reaffirm the commitment to that UN resolution which allowed the adoption of a no-fly zone over Libya. Also said that they were going to be very proactive in terms of humanitarian aid, making sure that particularly the new rebel-held towns had enough food, enough water and enough fuel to go around whilst the transition was taking place, and also to help plan for the future in Libya, making a wide coalition of political leaders together with the cooperation of the interim transitional national council, as it's being called, which is a group of opposition players. But beyond that, there's a lot of dissent around the table on what are key issues, and really key issues that relate to how to implement those three things that I've just outlined. Some countries, for example France, have already recognised these rebel forces as the legitimate government of Libya. Most other countries are hanging back on doing that. Some are calling for an immediate ceasefire. They include Italy and Turkey. On the other side of the coin, the US, we've heard this morning, doesn't rule out actively arming the rebels. And there's also the very controversial issue of whether to target Gaddafi specifically. We're hearing more agreement on that. And in fact, France and the UK came out ahead of this meeting with a joint statement saying that Gaddafi must go immediately. But other countries are saying that's beyond the remit of the UN resolution. So really a lot of disagreement starting out, and a very short time, around 2.5 hours, in which to iron out all those areas of disagreement and move forward.
So Laura, these delegates, they're meeting in London, they're discussing the future of Libya, but they're doing so without anyone from the troubled country actually attending. Nobody from the so-called rebel side, no one from the actual government that is in effect still in charge of the country. It does seem a bit bizarre. Do we know what the reaction in Libya is to all of this external discussion for the country's future?
Well, in fact, we are seeing members of the rebel forces of the opposition are here in London, and they have met this morning with William Hague and Hillary Clinton, and also the foreign ministers of France and Germany. So they are informing the process, but you're right, they haven't been invited to this main meeting. They have released a document which is written in the most beautiful English. It's the most beautifully put together document, being distributed and emailed and handed out to journalists by the Foreign Office, although the UK Foreign Office insists that they've had no part in writing it. And the interim transitional national council has also a short time ago given a media conference in which they said that the task of liberating Libya is for the Libyans, and they didn't ask for this intervention. They're quite pleased it's happened, but then going forward they must be in charge of the process themselves. They also, in this document that they released, they said that there are two non-negotiable points that they would like to see enforced. The first is that the new Libya should be a united Libya, one country with Tripoli as its capital. And the second is that they want to prosecute Gaddafi and his son and his aides in the International Court on humanitarian grounds. Now that might result in a bone of contention between Libya and whether or not this is the new government, between the Libyan people and the international community, because they're already divided about whether to actually bring Gaddafi Gaddafi to book. Some are committed to it, but other countries, including Italy and Germany, are saying, why don't we offer him a deal? Why don't we say if he steps down now, we'll offer him immunity from prosecution and that he can live out his life in exile? So that's also something that is likely to be discussed today. Of course, Gaddafi and his government are still in charge. No representative at all here in London at the meeting or on the fringes of the meeting from Gaddafi's government, which, as you rightly say, is still in charge in Libya, hasn't stepped down yet. But Gaddafi sent a letter to this meeting asking them to end what he's calling their barbaric offensive and likening these airstrikes to Hitler's military offensives in World War II. So he is really very angry about this meeting.
All right, RT's Laura Emmett there live in London. Thank you.